Hi, I'm Rebecca. I'm an American living in the south of France, and today I want to talk about tipping. This is kind of a controversial topic because tipping is really personal. You tip depending on how you feel the service was. Tipping in France is very different from tipping in the US. In the US, servers rely on tips. In my home state of South Carolina, I believe the minimum wage for servers is like $2.17 an hour, something like that, with the ability for them to make more based off of tips. I think they have to make at least $7.25 an hour with tips. I guess if they don't make that, then their workplace has to compensate that. But it's a really tough job, and unfortunately, the way the US has set up their tipping system, servers have to receive tips to make a living. It's a really hard job, and it's not something you can really do long term unless you work at a really high-end restaurant. Here in France, there are servers who make a living. They work as servers their entire lives. It depends on the restaurant, and obviously not everywhere. They pay their servers a fair wage here, a living wage, and the restaurants aren't very expensive in comparison. I'm not talking about in Paris, like in touristy areas, but in small towns, even in touristy areas, the food isn't outrageous. I feel like in the US, restaurants have gotten way more expensive. You could go out to lunch and find a small place to eat for maybe 13 euro for a plate, for a plat, what we would call an entree. And in the US, that would be hard to do. Food has just gotten a lot more expensive. And so it's amazing to me, as food prices increase, even the tips have increased in the US. 20%, in my opinion, used to be a decent tip. And we used to get the bill and it would have 10%, 15%, 20%. And now when I've gone back, a lot of times it'll have 20%, 22%, 25%, or even 30% sometimes on the receipt. And that's really surprising to me because the cost of food's gone up, everyone is struggling, and so it's really hard when you're expected to tip so much more. Here in France, you don't even get, when you get your bill, you don't even get that. I have never seen at a restaurant a receipt where I have to sign the receipt. And if I do have to sign it, it's because I'm using my American credit card, not because I've paid with my French bank card. And so you don't even really have the option to tip. Sometimes at restaurants, you'll have like a little tip jar at the register, but even then it's kind of expected to throw in a few coins, like a €1, €2 coin for a meal. So it's nice to tip, and you can tip when you have good service, but you're not tipping 20%. That's a really huge tip, and it's just not something that's done here. So places that you would tip are more like sit-down restaurants, and that's if you have good service. You can tip whether you have good service or not, if that's what makes you more comfortable, but it's pretty common, at least where I am in the south of France, for people to really only tip when the service is really good. We also don't live in an area with a really high cost of living. Servers are making a living wage. They are not having to worry about collecting tips. It's just a nice addition. I've also seen tip jars at hair salons, nail salons. I'm not sure how it works with like spas. Tipping is just like, you are not expected to tip like when you go get a haircut. There's the ability to, but even that tip is not, like if I went and got a haircut in the US and paid $30 for it, I would probably tip at least $6 for that haircut. That would be a decent tip, or at least when I lived there, that would have been a decent tip. Here, even like €2 is kind of considered a big tip. And I was talking with a family member, a French family member here, and they were like, you don't need to tip. So it's just really not expected because it's really just built into the cost. There are also things that are covered, like healthcare is is not expensive here. It's not free, but it's affordable, and the cost of living just isn't crazy high. So it's just not necessary to tip. I have gotten out of the habit of tipping like I did in the US, but I think it wasn't that difficult to get out of, because in the US, when we went back recently, I realized how in your face tipping is. It's when you pay at the coffee shop and they turn the screen around to sign, you immediately have to choose what percentage of a tip you're going to leave for just pouring a cup of coffee. If you are at an ice cream shop, when you pay, you have tip options, or there's a tip jar on the counter. And I don't want to be rude to anyone, but you're just scooping my ice cream. You didn't do anything really complicated. I used to hate that about going to bars when I was like in college or right out of college. Going and tipping a bartender $1 for a $2 beer is crazy, but we used to do it all the time because it's just kind of expected. And all they did was open our beer. They literally just popped the top of the beer. And so I do think tipping has just really gotten out of hand. In ways I think the French have kept their costs lower and been able to pay their employees a fair wage is by offering smaller menus. I find that not every restaurant, but a lot of restaurants here have smaller menus. So you don't have as many options, but you go to certain restaurants for certain things. You go to get crepe at a crepe place. You go to get like the local cuisine. You have these like local restaurants with the local specialties. You go to a pizza place to get pizza. Like, they don't have tons of options on the menu. It's very specific, and so they can offer those things, and they don't have to spend money on having all these ingredients on hand that go to waste. They also have fewer servers. So it's amazing how the French have just been trained to wait. They are used to having these long lunches and dinners. Their lunch break for a lot of people here, it's 2 hours. Not everyone, but a lot of people will get 1.5 to 2 hours to take a lunch, and then they get off work a little bit later. And so during that lunch break, they can afford to go sit at a restaurant for 1.5 hours if they want to. It's not a big deal to them. And so having someone come over after you've sat down for 15 minutes is not a big deal. Whereas in the US, I think people would leave the restaurant if they had to wait 15 minutes before a server came to their table. The servers are also less attentive, which is actually really nice. The servers will come over to take your order and to bring your food. And that's about it. They might check on you if they have time, but probably not. And if you need something, you just call someone over. It's not a big deal. In the US, they are always there. Like, it depends on the server, obviously, in the restaurant, but there are just so many times that a server will come to your table, they'll interrupt your conversation, and they have to be always working, and they're working for a tip. So I understand why they do it. They're really working for that tip. Most restaurants will leave a bottle of water on the table so you can refill it yourself, whereas in the US, they're coming over to top off your water or get you a refill on your drinks. That's another thing. The French don't really do refills. You can order another drink, but if you wanted to do that, you would still have to flag your server down to get a refill on your drink. I wish the US would change their tipping culture. I wish they would just pay servers a fair wage, and I think it's completely possible. I do think some of it is the culture around Americans not having a ton of time to wait. So you have to have more servers in a restaurant. Whereas in France, you can have a restaurant with 20 to 30 tables, and you can have 1 or 2 servers, and it could be packed, and people just wait. There's a restaurant near us. It's a little pizza place, and it's a husband and wife who run it, and the husband cooks the pizza, the wife is the server, and she also makes cocktails. Some nights it's just the husband there. Like, I think the wife will take like certain days, like they kind of take turns, and so she might not even be there, and he is taking orders, cooking pizza, making cocktails, and it's fine. And it's not always that busy, but they have the capacity for at least 20 people in their, or 20 maybe tables. But people are just willing to wait. It's just really part of the culture. Let me know if you have any specific questions about tipping culture. Obviously, I am talking about the south of France, a smaller area, but I have been to bigger cities and also seen how other people are also not really tipping, not 20%, not 30%. It's not done that way. Let me know what you have experienced as far as the tipping culture in France or Europe, wherever you're living. Love to hear what you have to say.